The Carolina Panthers are set to interview Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson on Friday in what has to be the centerpiece of their coaching search. Joining me now from the Detroit News is Lions beat writer Nolan Bianchi, who is very busy covering a Lions divisional playoff game this weekend. So happy to hear that, Nolan. It's going well for you guys up there, not so much for us down here. But I guess what has Ben Johnson kind of said about his all of the interest in him as a head coach right now as the Lions are in this playoff run?
All told, he said as little as possible. He definitely likes to keep the main thing, as they like to say in NFL circles, and focus on his job as offensive coordinator as the Detroit Lions. But yeah, it's becoming more and more real, and it's becoming more and more unavoidable to where, this week is as much as he'd like to keep the focus on the Lions questions and press conferences and stuff like that. This is the week where those two things start to merge, to where he actually is starting to get ready for those interviews, to where he's probably even having some of those interviews while also trying to get past the divisional rounds. So he's tried to say as little as possible throughout this whole process, but I think today was the first time that he kind of, felt like he had to maybe give some insight into his process and just things like that, because obviously fans want to know that he's still putting in the work on. But if you know Ben Johnson, that's almost something that you don't even have to worry about.
So it seems like in the Panthers coaching search, they've clearly are trending towards a young offensive mind. I feel like there's a bucket of candidates that are kind of the architect of their respective offenses, but not the play callers, and then vice versa. Ben Johnson seems to be both the architect and the guy calling the shots for the Lions.
Yeah, he does a little bit of everything, and he there's a reason why his players call him a genius, is because he is so involved at every level of designing and deploying that offense when it comes to schematically, the personnel, all those other things. He has full and complete control of those things, and I think that that's really what helps him be so effective, because he's able to kind of use these core principles and these I wouldn't go as far as to call it game theory, but like, definitely I know that you know what I know, but it's not what I know as you know, or just whatever it is. So and he's a very cerebral guy with a background in mathematics, and on top of being a really good football mind, I think all of those things help him as well to kind of create a full package offense that, for the most part, over these last two seasons has not really stumbled at all.
When you watch his offense over the last two seasons, what stands out about what kind of the basic principles of it are, kind of where it comes from, his coaching tree? What have you kind of identified over the past 2 years?
Yeah, he's got a little bit of a West Coast influence to him. One of my coworkers, Justin Rogers, wrote a real big story about kind of just his influences along the way, because I think in this Dan Campbell era, he's not a Dan Campbell guy, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make. He was hired before Dan Campbell got here. He was kept on by Dan Campbell, and going into the last season, we didn't even know if he was going to be calling the plays or anything like that. So being able to kind of see everything come together has been really, really cool. There's one kind of defining trait to him that stands out to me, and some of his players have said it too. But just the kind of the principle is, he wants everything the same to look different, and everything different to look the same. And you can kind of see that out there with the way they're constantly fooling defenses in a gotta have it moment. I think back to the game they just played against the LA Rams, and they drove down the field, scored pretty easily on their first two drives, and then on their third drive, it gets to 4th and 1. He puts the heavy personnel out there. The Rams put their heavy personnel out there, and then he's got Sam Laporta, one of the best tight ends in the game, one-on-one with a guy who he should not be one-on-one with. So it's just those little things, like whenever you gotta have it, gotta get in the end
Yeah.
zone. Those are the things that kind of stick out to you. And then I believe his dad coached at the Citadel, so there's some high standard to him, as well as his background in mathematics that I touched on. There's just a ton of precision. I think that's one of the things that stands out as well.
What has made Jared Goff such a good match with this Ben Johnson offense? And can maybe a smaller quarterback operate out of this offense, since we're asking this in Charlotte?
Yeah, I would say that, like, I wouldn't say there's a ton of parallels to Jared Goff and Bryce Young at this current juncture, but there are some parallels that I can kind of see, which is just like when Jared got here, he was a quarterback who was not playing with a lot of confidence. Even in that first season when Ben Johnson was not the OC, he didn't have a ton of success, but also wasn't set up for a ton of success. And the real big difference that you saw, I think, in between year one and year two for Jared Goff was the ability to kind of build out the entire offensive playbook with Ben Johnson over the course of that summer, but B, just the feedback that Ben Johnson was willing to take from Goff on, hey, what do you like? What works best for you in these situations? And, he took Jared Goff from a quarterback who, was probably struggling with confidence personally and as a football player. And he turned it back into the guy that he was when he was, playing really well with the Los Angeles Rams, if not even more confident, because I think he does have more creativity, more freedom within the system than he did in the Sean McVay system. And so I think, Bryce and Ben Johnson could be a good match because I do see Ben being able to deploy some of those same things with Bryce. And then from the hard coaching standpoint, like that's definitely something that I would imagine Bryce could take, having played quarterback for Nick Saban. So I do think that if there is kind of a guy who might be able to help him, that Ben Johnson definitely seems like a guy who could.
What about him as a leader and how, you kind of talked about it with hard coaching and having a standard. So, I mean, this isn't a guy who played in the NFL. This is kind of like, just on his resumes, like, oh, he's a math major. He was a walk-on in college down here at Carolina. But, when they talk about leader of men and that being an important trait, what do you see from him in that regard?
Just the ability to, I don't even know if I would call it criticism, but just like critical feedback from his players, from the people around him. That hard coaching thing, I think, is something that stems from him and being able to take it himself. And so, we've heard so many stories just since he's been here about, St. Brown. He runs a route and he sees this and he comes back to Ben on the sideline and he tells him what he saw, and then they go, okay, like let's make an adjustment off of that. And so I think that is probably one of the better qualities of Ben Johnson, is his ability to listen to people around him and use that to get the most out of them.
So obviously Ben bet on himself and took his name out of the running. He probably could have had the Panthers job, and several others that he was interviewing with. I know Panthers fans really are like, we're quick to view it as like he doesn't want us. Do you think that was a kind of him putting a halt to things league wide, just Carolina? And why do you think he did that? Obviously, it worked.
I think it was him putting a halt to things league wide. I think things happened for him very quickly last year. Like I said, going into the final preseason game that they played in 2022, you didn't even know if he was going to be calling plays come week one against the Eagles. And so obviously he assumes the full-time duty of offensive coordinator, and then he's calling plays for the first time in his life. And then, I think over the course of this season, the Lions offense was playing really well, but the defense wasn't having a ton of success early. And so there was just so much, I guess, probably attention paid on maintaining the standard that they had set from week one. And I think by the time the end of the season got here and maybe the interviews got here, that it maybe just kind of snuck up on him a bit. And there was probably part of him that realized, like, okay, maybe, I do need to take a second to think about these things that I've never really thought of before, because I've never been in a position to be a head coach before. And there's so many things that, people would really be surprised that they are expected to know when they go in for these head coach interviews, staff they're going to have and things like that. And so I haven't heard anything concrete about it, but I do feel like it wasn't a Carolina thing. And that it was probably just something where he was like, let me just go back, get a little bit more experience under my belt and be ready to kind of attack the head coaching opportunities head on when they come up again in the future, be more ready for them, and just kind of do his thing in the meantime.
This might be tougher for you to answer, but what might Ben Johnson want? I mean, he's obviously got all of these options. He's probably the most sought after coaching candidate, not named Bill Belichick. People in Carolina look at their own situation and worry that he might not want to come here despite his ties to the region. What do you think he might be looking for in his first head coaching
Well,
position,
it's hard.
his new place?
Yeah, it's hard to say. He actually was just asked about this at the podium, like probably 5 minutes before we jumped on, and he was saying that he doesn't really decide that; it's other people that decide it for him. So I thought that was kind of curious. I will say though, I do wonder if Carolina is attractive to him. There's obviously the fact that he was born and raised there, and all those other things. He's got all those family ties. He played, he was a walk on at UNC. But at the same time, like Frank Reich was a really highly regarded coach at the time that he was hired by the Panthers. He put together a pretty good staff that had a lot of people like, oh, okay, let's see what's going on with the Panthers. And then it just completely fell apart. And I would be when the reports about his ridiculously high salary number came out, I wonder if that was a number he gave specifically to Carolina because of maybe the situation that has gone on there in the last year. And I just don't know at the end of the day if Ben Johnson is going to be okay with being in an organization where he is micromanaged, if he does have options out there that would maybe be a different kind of workplace setup. But at the same time, you know, Tepper might offer the most, and there always is something about going home. So you never know. And it's hard to say with him because he hasn't done this dance too much before.
All right, Nolan Bianchi from the Detroit News. Appreciate it, man. Enjoy a second playoff game.
Yeah, it should be fun. Should be fun.